Good morning. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Amplify with Lynette. What would your reaction have been if I told you, well, 6 months ago, that there would be at one stage in our democracy, there'll be a bromance forming between the ANC and the Freedom Front Plus, and suddenly the DA would find itself out in the cold. What on earth is happening? Well, for some perspective and some insights, and hopefully some stirring, I've invited political analyst Dr. Calvin Knowles to Amplify with Lynette this morning. He is also the founder and managing director of Calvin Knowles Consultancy. And it's the first time we actually get to speak to each other. Good morning. Welcome to Amplify with Lynette.
Good morning, Lynette, and thank you for inviting me to be on your channel. I'm looking forward to discussing a few very important things that's currently happening. So yeah, thank you for
Yeah,
having me, and good morning to the viewers.
yeah, this is literally the pulse of what's happening and developing in South Africa. If I told you, Calvin, a few months ago
Hmm.
that you would find this nurturing or hankering between the ANC and the Freedom Front Plus, opposite sides of the spectrum, with the DA finding themselves out in the cold. From what I understand, Connie Mulder even said that they think they need to get mediation involved. It's just
Yeah,
shocking.
yeah. Now you see, Lynette, we have to go back, and it's only when we look back that we can connect the dots, sort of going forward. And that's a useful exercise to do. I know, for instance, that when I did my research on coalitions, for me, 2016, it, uh, it was a new phenomenon. And what actually urged me to sort of explore it deeper, to sort of dive deeper into it, were the assertions that were made by commentators and other analysts saying that come 2024, we might see a coalition at national level, especially now what was transpiring at the local level in 2016, when we saw these coalitions sort of coming to the fore. At the time, people thought this was a new phenomenon, but of course we had that, in previous years, whether it be the local level, and we also had the GNU, in 1994, sort of that reconciliatory GNU that former President Mandela sort of brought in. But I must admit, at that time, my focus was solely on understanding how this is going to happen or sort of pan out at the local level. And I, for one, sort of differed with other analysts and commentators predicting this coalition that we currently see now. I still, a part of me still said no. I think the ANC, due to the sentimental vote rather that they get over the years, being the liberators, that sort of carries heavy weight when it comes to the electorate. So I thought, no, it would be premature to actually make sort of predictions like that. But now here we are. So I'm looking back, and I'm seeing, especially post 2016, but then also even prior to that, the ANC was on a declining trajectory over the last four electoral cycles at a national level. It was declining. So the inevitable happened, and what this presented now, for other parties at least also, and for the ANC definitely, is that take stock of the moment we are here now and how we're going to move this country forward. And of course, a lot of options. They had a lot of options, or some options at least, maybe not a lot, but they had other options to go to, other avenues to explore, bringing in coalition partners and so forth. I mean, Fakile Mbalulu, the SG of the ANC, said, prior to the elections and in his election hearing, he said, we're going outright for a majority. Now, there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with being ambitious. There's nothing wrong with being ambitious and saying, no, listen here, we're going to go out for an outright majority. But at the end of the day, I think at the back of their head or their heads, the ANC knew that it might get a hiding at the ballot box, which it didn't. It fell short of the threshold, to govern. And there's a couple of things. We waited once the results were in, and we could see that some provinces, the ANC did not get an outright majority, and during that time, obviously, they sort of put their hand out and said, okay, listen here, who are we going to talk to? Are we going to enter into negotiations with? But a part of me also believes that this actually happened before the elections. This happened before the elections. Not only from the ANC side, we also know that, excuse me, that the DA in April of last year, they sort of launched this, what was then called the Moonshot Pact.
Moon
And
Party.
then later it was renamed the Multi-Party Charter, sort of to unite the oppositions, sort of tackle the elections under one umbrella. And now that didn't work out necessarily because, I mean, Action SA sort of refused to be part of the deal that emerged later on, that was put on the table. So interesting time, yes. But also to answer your question again, so having looking back, I mean, I look back and I said, okay, no, it's not going to happen. But now we are here. And you see, this is what political maturity is for me. Because this whole thing of the GNU is driving on the back, or riding on the back rather, of putting South Africans first. Because you have these
Mm.
narrow and partisan interests, you've got a constituency, you've got the electorate that you must appease, and you make pronouncements such as, we will never go to bed with the ANC,
Yes.
we will never
Mm.
do this. But then you backtrack. Now, for me, that's a sign of political maturity. Some people might call it political opportunism. Being opportunistic, that is not always a bad thing. It can be done for the good as well.
Also, but
Yeah.
the fact that you have all these parties come together, because I've seen there's a lot of uncertainty what to call this. Do you call it the coalition of the wounded? Do you call it a government of national unity? Are you allowed, from the opposition side of the DA, for example, are you allowed to critique or be critical of decisions being made? And if you are, whether you are at Action SA or you at Freedom from Plus, if you are critical, does that mean you are suddenly in opposition to this national unity that we're trying to establish, all these parties working together for the greater good of South Africa? Is that how this is playing out?
Yeah, no, definitely. A few points just to answer that question, or is that, let's be honest. I'm gonna put it out here. I'm gonna say that the DA, it's the official opposition. It garnered, I think, just over 20% of the vote. But I mean, that's a far cry, or I mean, it's a very long shot still to get into government itself. So they took stock of that and that reality check. And I mean, they had it. They knew that they will not get the majority vote. They did not necessarily make pronouncements even about that. Their only chance would have been if the multi-party charter decided, we're going to tackle this election under one umbrella, even sort of pushing forward agreed upon candidates, for the presidency and all of that, and fighting it under one banner. But that didn't happen because, I mean, these parties represent different constituencies. So you don't want to alienate your support as well. But
True.
the DA, this is the only chance that they have to get into government, and not just merely sitting on the opposition benches and sitting in parliament and making prolific speeches and sort of critiquing. Now they're part and
Mm.
parcel of how this country is going to govern. And that was the only way for them to get their foot into the door. Now, obviously, some people would say, no, it's a betrayal. They are sellouts. Not necessarily the DA. I'm talking about more to the left. They were, I mean, the EFF, I mean, said, for instance, and MK also, that the ANC sold out. They sold out to the former colonialists and oppressors and all of that. And I want to latch on to what Gayton McKenzie said, when in his response to an EFF member of parliament, I forgot the gentleman's name. I know he's an actor as well, or a former actor then, where he said that we don't live there anymore. This is where we live now. You live in that past. This is our reality. So the DA took their chances. They in government. They, if memory serves me correct, they hold about 6 ministerial positions. We can debate about whether these are soft positions or soft portfolios rather, or sort of key ones. I know the ANC got like the economic cluster. They still sort of maintain that. But nonetheless, whether it's being Minister of Sport, like, I mean, Gayton McKenzie is, already we've seen that that is doing things. And that is the only way where you can affect governance. And say to your electorate, listen here, I know we said this, but this is our reality. These are the cards that we were dealt with. And we're going to enter this GNU. Now, I know there's a lot being said. It's a grand coalition. It's not a GNU. For me, it's neither here nor there. That's just a matter of
Okay, but
semantics.
why?
At the end of the day,
Why is it important to name it? Because it's you to you saying now it doesn't really matter to you, but why are other parties and other commentators emphasizing that it needs to be a name? Why?
yeah, I think if we persist in naming it the Government of National Unity, then I think the use of I mean labeling it a Government of National Unity, a lot of emotion sort of goes into those three words, Government of National Unity, especially, or four words at least, especially, the two last was national unity. And I think that is
Mm,
what they're trying to drive to the electorate or to us, citizens, saying that this government's aim is to be united despite our differences. Now, when it comes to a grand coalition, for instance, it basically is the same thing where we have like parties coming together and in the best interest of the country, they negotiate a deal, they share sort of portfolios, whether the key portfolios or not, for me doesn't also matter as long as you get your foot in the door. So I
mm,
think if you look at the former GNU, as I said earlier on, the fact that Madiba sort of brought other parties in as a means to sort of enhance the reconciliation agenda at the time. I mean, we just came from a very divided past. We are still divided, I think, along a lot of lines. So
mm.
it means a lot to call it the GNU as opposed to calling it a grand coalition, because the term coalition in itself can be problematic for some parties because it means working together. And then all those other indictments come in. Yeah, you were a sellout. You sort of said you're not going to enter into coalitions. So rather to stay clear of those indictments or accusations, rather, let's call this a government of national unity.
So let me go back to my earlier comment and question about this bromance that's developing between the ANC and the Freedom Front Plus, for example, and the DA finding them out in the cold. Could one have seen this? Because it seems that there's a lot of jostling. You look at what's happened in Oudtshoorn, you look at other municipalities. It
Yeah.
seems that nothing is settled yet. Is it unfair to have an expectation that by now we would have checked out the ground and see how firm and how solid we are? Or is it still a case of jostling for, listen, as long as we can be the kingmaker, it comes with benefits. Let us be the people in power to call the shots.
I think, yeah. So I don't want to call it alienation between your former moonshot backed or multi-party charter partners, because I mean the Freedom Front Plus at least and the DA, they were involved in that. Um, I think what the Freedom Front is realizing now is that, and I mean Professor Boyson at the Mr. Report launched the other day, I was a panelist there. She mentioned sort of citing that Oudtshoorn example where they removed the DA mayor of Oudtshoorn with the ANC. They stood with the ANC, sort of, they threw their weight behind the ANC. So I think the multi-party charter in itself was a good thing for those parties at the time. But when we get nearer to the elections, some of those parties realize that, listen, yeah, this is now not going to work out the way we sort of want it to work out. So I wouldn't say that there's trouble between the DA and the Freedom Front Plus. I think the Freedom Front Plus, you must understand also now that Peter Groenewald is Minister of Correctional Services. And I
Yes.
mean, that's a minority party. That's a minority party. So maybe in their interactions with the ANC, during the negotiations now, they most probably sort of realize that these are guys we can, or people rather, we can talk to. So I think that is just purely what's happening there. And also remember now, power shared can also be seen as good enough as sort of having full power, because it comes back to that. When are
Yeah.
we going to have a Freedom Front Plus mayor? Maybe never. So
Mm.
when we are there where it matters, where we can affect change, then we'll take that opportunity. So we'll go back on what we said earlier on. We'll never deal with ANC. We'll never go govern with ANC. At the end of the day, this is the reality. The ANC, yes, they didn't get to the majority, but they still had the most votes. So, I mean, like they said, Afrikaans, let's learn op die gitaar. And
Yeah.
I mean, you must be mindful of that, at the end of the day. So I don't think it's problematic necessarily, the Freedom Front and DA's relationship. Still think there are people in there that can keep that together. But in my own research, one of the things that I have highlighted, um, looking at coalitions, one dynamic that I think sort of has not been adequately researched or looked at is the influence of personalities in coalitions and
Mm.
how leadership styles can make or break a coalition. Because you will
I'm
have
gonna bring you
some
back
auto.
to that.
Mm,
I'm going to
yeah,
bring
it's
you
fine.
back to that. I quickly just want you to comment on Dorian's comment here. Welcome, Dorian. Welcome to Amplify with Lynette. We're talking about the Coalition of the Wounded, or Government of National Unity, or Grand Coalition. What are we supposed to call it? My guest this morning is Dr. Calvin Knowles. He's a political analyst, but also he's the founder and managing director of Calvin Knowles Consultancy. Dorian says GNU doing great so far. Give them a chance. We need to turn SA around. Do you
Mm.
concur with Dorian?
Yes, I do. I do definitely. And again, I in the spaces that I sort of move in, I'm very much an independent. I'm not affiliated to any university, for instance, so I don't sit here representing a particular university. And at a conference a couple of months ago, that where we unpacked this GNU and what transpired post the elections, I said, for instance, that I've got this where I don't have this around my neck saying, listen, yeah, I represent a certain institution. I speak first of all, as someone that's got a keen interest in political developments. I've got a keen interest in research, and dynamics of politics and how they play in the interaction between parties. But more than that, I'm a citizen of this country. And whatever sort of government transpires at the end of the day, that affects me. It affects my
Yes.
children, going forward. So I speak from that position where I said that we had enough 30 years of ANC governance, and it's time for a change. So I sort of removed myself from that sort of academic position or position in academia. I was an analyst, and just stood there and said, "Listen, yeah, I think this is the best thing that could have happened after 30 years of mismanagement of the ANC. They sort of had the innings now, and they're out. Not they're out, but there's no other way for them just to govern alone. They couldn't. I mean, the numbers didn't allow them to. So this, for me, this GNU must work. It's going to take a lot. It's not necessarily easy. It's something that is rather novel to South Africa. It's happened, over years, over decades in Europe. There are even parties in coalition governing for decades in certain parts of Europe. So we've got a lot to learn, and that is what my research tried to understand, drawing lessons from Western Europe in particular. How they went about when we look at what makes up a coalition. Will it survive? What are the things that threaten it? What are the things that can possibly implode it?
Calvin, I want
Yeah,
to take you back to your comment that a lot of people did not look at the personalities and leadership styles of characters within coalitions. But touch on that. But also, let's talk about the new entrants that has drastically influenced and changed and is shaping this
yeah.
political landscape in South Africa. Not only nationally, but also in the provinces, because there's been some major shifts as well.
No, definitely. So I'm going to answer it twofold. The one
Please
is
do.
that, yeah, no, of course, when we have new entrants or the proliferation of political parties, they're mushrooming up. It's a sign that democracy is maturing. Okay, so it's good. There's contestation, different constituencies or different interests. I mean, we've got the Cape, what is it called, colored Congress, I think. So that slants to identity politics with the PA. So there's a whole mix, because Rising Zanzi, all of that, and all these parties are born two things out of the frustration of being saddled up with an ANC government that has been failing. That's the one thing. So you want to provide an alternative. The second thing is that, talking about proliferation, we must not forget that the EFF and the MK party now, and even COPE before that, they were just splinter groups of the ANC. So we can say, yeah, it's good for democracy. It shows that democracy is maturing. But on the other hand, some analysts are saying, no, it sort of just messes it up. In other countries, we don't have so many political parties. It confuses the electorate and all of that. At the end of the day, people want alternatives. And if you can provide that in the absence of the ANC sort of governing the way it should be governing, I mean, then why not? Now to
Mm.
talk about personalities, I suppose I have to be a little bit careful to mention people, but it's out there in the public domain. You know, when some of the coalitions imploded, you will hear uh, assertions made in the media. You know, saying that leader X in that metro was autocratic. He
Yes.
defied national directives. You know, leader X sort of walked out of a meeting. You know, those little things. And now on a national level, if you look at, for instance, the president of the EFF, Julius Malema, hardline, not willing to compromise, very populist, and that rhetoric finds a lot of fertile ground for a certain part of South Africans, the youth in particular. But so those the influence of personalities. At the end of the day, I mean, look at what Mandela was reconciliatory. So some people are saying now it was too soft. You know, when we
Yes.
entered Kodesa, or too many compromises were made. He's a sellout, you know, and all those things. But at the end of the day, what overshadows that? What overshadows that is that if that was not the position that the ANC took, I mean, we were on the brink of civil war at that time, right? So it takes a mature leader that is politically sophisticated. And I've mentioned it the other day, you know, to be able to say that we have this differing and quite stark, you know, differences on key issues, key policy issues, ideology, for instance. But it is a farce. I mean, if that's a correct word to use, it's a fallacy rather that when you are politically so divergent that automatically a coalition will sort of fail. No, we have coalitions in Europe again. I mean, that's where it's rife of fundamentalist Christian parties working together with communist parties. You know, they're atheists on the other hand. So we need to find that and have leaders that are sober minded, that does not make these decisions out of position of they don't have any referent power. If you have referent power, you can speak about morality. You can speak about doing good for the betterment of society. You can speak about putting people first. But if you have a lavish lifestyle, it's totally contradictory to what you are putting out there.
Contradictory.
And yeah, and of course, what's happening in the EFF now with Floyd Chavambo leaving and joining MK and all of that, um, a lot has got to do with the way Julius Malema runs the EFF. And I mean, it's how old is the party now? 10, 11 years, I think. And we haven't seen another leader. Whereas the ANC would have elective conferences. The DA would have their conferences where they would elect new leaders, you know, and that's unhealthy. That is fertile ground for contentment to breed. And at the end of the day, also, the impression that I get is that, and I mean, media reports spoke of that there were parallel negotiations. Apparently, and I speak under correction, I stand to be corrected, like what Malema did, he came with those demands for a party that got under 10%. We also have to look at that, you know, and I've mentioned it earlier. That the ANC wasn't lose sight of the fact that the ANC did not get the majority, but they still the party that got the most votes. So they would go in there and they then still have the authority to say, no, we cannot give you the deputy presidency. We cannot give you the finance portfolio. So you bargain on the back
Mm.
of the amount of votes and percentage votes that you accrued. And you cannot go in there with the attitude of these are our demands, take it or leave it. If not, then we're going to do this. So I think Freud's departure from the EFF, because a rumor has it that there were parallel negotiations. Malema sort of wanted the deputy presidency, and I think the deputy speaker position for a lady whose surname I think is Umpeta. I speak under correction there. Whereas
Mhm.
Floyd, also on the other hand, he felt sort of how can I put it now? There's a word for it, but I can't get to it. Sort of done in when he heard that, oh no, but Malema is doing this at the back, you know, and when he didn't get what he wanted, he sort of just pulled out. So it's that dictatorial sort of leadership style, autocratic leadership style that will alienate even the best within your party.
Mm.
Yeah.
So elaborate. You've spent some time now talking about um Julius Malema, and we touched on Floyd Shivambu. Let's talk about all the other new entrants. Let's talk about a Gayton McKenzie briefly so that we can talk
Yeah,
about what's happening in the
of
various
course.
municipalities. But who else stands out for you? And isn't it shocking, though, Calvin, that there is no woman leader to be seen?
Yeah, no, definitely. Okay, let me answer the first one. So,
Mm,
Gayton is Gayton McKenzie is an activist. I think the tag of activist, I think, supersedes the tag that's been put on him, saying he's a populist. Sort of, he shoots from the hip and he makes correct. I don't want to say noises, statements that appeal to a certain part of our population, in particular the colored, so-called colored community. But that activist role, cleverly, he took it on, and now is part of a cabinet, Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture. And already we see, from the first day in office, uh, putting those super fans out of, traveling on taxpayers'
yes.
expenses, to these, sporting events across the globe and all of that. That's what people want to see. And but you ask yourself the question: if he was not a minister, he would have remained on the sidelines, from the outside, looking in and making those pronouncements. Now, where the EFF failed dismally, and they will now remain a protest party, is when they threw their toys out of the cot and said, listen, if we don't concede to these demands that we have, then we don't want any part of this. But then you are reduced to just being a protest party making noises. I think also, Lynette, sorry, man. Another
Mm,
thing is that they have promised not to be so disruptive in Parliament, because that is what they were
known
characterized
for.
by or are characterized by.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. But I'm not wondering, isn't MK now replacing them in that manner?
you see, again, um, MK, I mean, it fared better than the EFF, and the EFF has been around for a decade. So the first contestation of elections, I think they garnered about 14%, if I'm not mistaken, just over 14% of the total vote. And then the most votes in KZN. So KZN is governed by a coalition. But I mean, it's both. Now they identity politics play a role, along ethnic lines and so forth. So is the EFF intimidated by the MK party? You know what? I think they sing from the same hymn sheet.
Mm.
In a lot of
Because they
in a
all
lot
come
of
from the same.
aspects,
They come from the same mold.
they come from the same mold, yes. And now you've got to interrogate now the reasons why they splintered off from the ANC. What are those reasons? And are those reasons healthy reasons for these parties to sort of, I don't want to say continue to exist, but if their formation was based purely on issues they had with the ANC that they belong to, then I don't think it bodes well for them going forward. And we've already seen that the EFF got on 10%. It's a shrinking party, and
Mm.
it thrives mainly in universities, the youth, and all of that. But I think even if that part of the electorate, as they grow older, they're going to outgrow the EFF at the end of the day. So for the MK and the EFF, they've got a role to play. Obviously, I mean, they got support. They in Parliament. But I think people are not sobering up. Yeah, people are sobering up. They are sobering up to the fact that this radical economic transformation agenda that these parties are pushing, at the end of the day, this is where we find ourselves in a situation economically, and what are the policies that's going to cause regress, or what are the policies that's going to make sure that we become investor friendly. And that is why I said also, I mean, you've mentioned earlier on coalition of the wounded, and I said at the
Mm.
conference the other day, who's wounded? I mean, MK did fairly well for a first entrant. They are wounded, not only that they are wounded purely because the ANC shunned them. They came with ridiculous demands, the ANC shunned them. That makes them wounded. They come back, and I've said it the other day, I don't know, because a lot of sentiment that I pick up on social media, people are happy with the way things are being done. Home Affairs is working, there's backlogs being cleared of 10 years of visas and permits. The police minister is an ANC minister, Senzo Mkunu. But then you have, for instance, the chairperson of the portfolio committee police, Ian Cameron. So they feed off each other, and things are being done
Yeah.
for the better good. That hasn't been done for years.
So, if
Yeah.
you've only joined us now, or you're listening to the replay of this conversation, I'm chatting to Dr. Calvin Knowles. He's a political analyst, and as he pointed out earlier, no affiliation to any university, very, very independent. Also, the founder and managing director of the Calvin Knowles Consultancy. We're talking about where we find ourselves in South Africa at the moment. Do we call and look at it as a formation of these little parties that we've seen? Is it a coalition of the wounded? Dr. Knowles just clarified how he views that. Or can we start talking about a government of national unity? Feel free to comment in the comment section if you're watching on the replay. Maybe there are certain things that you want us to clarify in the future. We'll gladly invite him again to talk about it. So you're not here right now, but when you get an opportunity to watch on the replay, just type also and tell me where you're watching from and your thoughts. Listen, let's move to the impact this has had on municipalities and in various provinces. Your take on the developments there. Let's start in the Northern
Yeah.
Cape, for example.
So in the Northern Cape, my research, that I did recently, sort of, I relied on an HSRC publication. I think it's the Elections Indicator Report of 2021, where they go and they gauge how satisfied are people with municipal performances. And there was a significant drop from the first report, not the first report, a report that they did in I think 2010, and 11 years later, the 2021 report, 20% drop. From a 40% being satisfied with what's happening to a 21%. So clearly, those are the things that fuel voters to say that there's no service delivery, there's infighting in these municipalities, there's patronage, there's corruption. I'm from Nelson Mandela Bay. We have a mayor from a very small party that has been elevated to that position by the help of the ANC, and the former mayor Tief Orendaal was ousted. And I'm not here to propagate for any political party, but at the end of the day, you look at the track record of governance. And I think now what happened in Joburg, for instance, also Al Jamar mayor, small party, very
Yes.
small party, you know. So
Yes.
these parties, call them kingmakers or whatever, they are elevated to that level. But they're elevated to that level, but who pulls the strings at the end of the day? So in the Northern Cape, there are municipalities, where the PA, for instance, I can't remember now, is it the Salt Lake municipality, where they sort of came in. There's another social movement or community-based movement. I think it's the Makwaland Civic Movement, if I'm not mistaken. They ousted the
Yes.
DA to become the official opposition. So again, I've mentioned identity politics earlier. You know, um, a lot of people feel marginalized in some of these metros, some of these municipalities, and then that's fertile ground for parties like the PA to say that, listen here, you're neglecting the colored constituency, for instance.
Mm.
But
Ma,
Lynette,
isn't it
but
also,
but yeah,
sorry, Calvin. Isn't it
now
also
it's
just the
fine.
case that communities are gutful of the promises that were made, and they've literally taken matters into their own hands? That's why you see that
Yeah,
there's an upsurge of community keys or organizations that feel the government ain't coming to save us. We need to
yeah,
start and do this ourselves. Ons moet nou vinger en hand aan die wiel slaan en dit verander
yeah.
because nobody's going to do this. And that's why you have a bigger buy-in now.
Mm. No, definitely. At the end of the day, you know that for a lot of these people, politics is a career. They're careerists. It's their job. So they see it as a job getting, into office, and I'm going to get X, my salary and all these perks and whatever. And then they forget. And that activist role that they used to play, and some of them that doesn't even have an activist background, you know. So for me, it will serve you good if you've been an activist, you know, active in your community, looking after your community, putting their issues on the agenda, speak out against the social ills in your community, you know, playing people on Cape Flats, for instance, in the northern areas here where I'm from, gangsterism and all of that. And then out of that, you morph into a political representative. And then you've got that background to say, listen, I'm a fighter and fighting for my community and highlighting their plight. You know, I've got a bigger platform now. I must make it count. Are these people making it count? And there's so many stories going around saying that they're just there, as they call it. It's the politics of the stomach. You know, so they're just there to enrich themselves. They're just there to extend their patronage networks and sort of feed off tenders and all those nasty things. You know, they completely forget the why they're there for in the first place. And that is why people are becoming hurtful. People are becoming hurtful, to use that word as well. They quite simply fed up with the way things are going. However, I also penned an article a while ago for LitNet, you know, where I said that, and I want to talk about this because I think there's a reluctance to talk about it. We've mentioned now communities. So in the bigger scheme of things, we can say that crime affects every community. Crime is more rife in communities that are struggling, you know, in the townships. It's a rife, you know, for a variety of reasons. But in that article on LitNet, I pinned that article based on two things. I spoke there and I said that as a youth activist myself, going back, I was a member of the ANC, and I'm saying it in this platform. So it was the party that liberated me. It was the party that, in my very small role, you know, as a student activist at the time, sort of played a very small, minuscule role as opposed to others. But I had my second liberation. And my second liberation came when I saw that where this party is heading now is completely different to the things that I stood for and what they propagated for. So a lot of people then became disillusioned, you know. But what do you do with that disillusionment? That provides now other parties to come in and say, listen, you know, we're going to put this on the agenda, radical economic transformation, and all of. So they're exploiting the discontent that's there. But communities should play a more active role, and they should not. And unfortunately, you still have those people who are hell bent on supporting parties that they know cannot take them anywhere, didn't bring them anywhere. So that is why we have all these parties sort of popping up and all of that. So really, a lot of communities are marginalized. A lot of communities are very much at the receiving end of racially based legislation. It's just another form of social engineering that we had in the past. And I might not agree always with some of the sentiments, but it's very much a reality. They feel marginalized because of things such as legislation, as I meant, you know, distribution of funds, having access, you know, to the job market, you know, and there's employment equity, there's affirmative action, there's black economic empowerment. And these communities, you know, in particular the so-called colored community, there's an element of hurtfulness, to sort of put it very bluntly to you. And how do they channel that? How do they channel that? You spoke about representation in terms of women, but if you just look at the racial demographics in certain parts, how underrepresented certain races are. And I don't want to talk about the race, but it's a reality in South Africa. I mean, we still have to put on application forms what race you are. And I mean, we are governed or were governed for the longest time by a party that propagates non-racialism. So why do we still have to do that? So yeah, there's an element of really, you know, people realizing this year, we left out in the cold. We have to ourselves, and because if we don't, who's going to do that?
What I think what we should do is this really necessitates a conversation about identity politics, because we try to
Of
talk
course,
around it, but the what we've seen, the result of the way the voting patterns and what people chose, and also these new entrants, it says to you that there
yeah,
is a solid. You can try and explain it away. You can try and call it tribalism, whatever you want to
yeah,
call it. It's not going to go away. The fact that people
it's not going to
feel
go away. Yeah,
exactly the only way we're going to make
yeah,
progress is if we stand together. That's why you saw the
yes,
outcomes in KwaZulu-Natal. You saw it in the
yeah,
Western Cape. it is our reality, and we need to talk about
Yes.
identity politics, whether
Yeah.
we like it or not. So I'm going to invite you. I'll check with you and your diary when you would be
Yeah.
available, and I'll get another guest as well, and let's really get our teeth into it. Where and why
Of
we're
course.
struggling with it right now. I want to thank you for your
Yeah.
time, your available time. I appreciate it. This will definitely not be the last time that I chat to you. You must have a great day. Thank you for your insights. This the voice of political analyst Dr. Calvin Knowles. He's also the founder and managing director of the Calvin Knowles Consultancy. I'm just kind of getting his thoughts about where we find ourselves right now in the attempt to govern all these little parties together. How successful are we or not? And if you are watching this on the replay, please share your thoughts in the comment section. I'd love to hear your take on some of the stuff that he shared, his insights, whether you agree with him or not. I'm keen to know, and I'm sure you don't have a problem if people take issue with what you say, Kelvin.
No, no, not at all. Not at all. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for inviting me. It's nice to engage. I think we have to tackle the uncomfortable questions, like the national question that you've just mentioned. People skirt around it. In that article that I penned, I said that there's a void, there's an absence amongst black or so-called colored intellectuals to talk about the place, because they sort of skirt around the issue. They want to be politically correct and all of that, but it impacts the formation of social movements based or grounded in race, grounded in identity.
You
Because
see,
I think there's been, yeah,
this is
no,
why
it's
I
fine.
asked you earlier at the beginning whether it is still okay, because we're now all kumbayaing with what we've
Mm.
achieved after the election. But is there room for criticism? Is there room to say no, but we're not happy? Or are we just holding our breath and hoping for the best, because this coalitions and this the unity is so fragile that we don't want to see that we are in opposition to what we're trying to form.
No, I think the GNU, I think pretty much they trashed out the fact that there will be differences, but it's how you deal with those differences. And whatever your status is within a GNU, whether you're the senior partner or the junior partner, your Aljamal with one sort of deputy minister portfolio position, or whatever, or Gaten McKenzie, sort of just one person from the PA in cabinet. I think, and I've mentioned the national question. We didn't answer the national question. And you mentioned we are kumbayaing now. At the end of the day, whether you do whatever you want to do in terms of making your portfolio work, and you're showing people, that this DA minister, I've got a problem with that too, is making home affairs work at the end of the day. You need to tackle the things that we're reeling from, the legacy of racial, ethnic, and class divisions, and that have historically shaped the country, and it will for time to come. So that's something that they might at this point be sort of not scared to talk about, but they are testing the waters. They first want to keep this GNU alive, not that it's dying, but those
Mm.
serious conversations. They will have to have those serious conversations going forward.
And if they don't, we certainly will here on Amplify with Lynette. So thank
Yeah,
you,
definitely.
Dorian. Spot on. Great topic and interview. All we need is love. It's more than just love. Oh, no, no, no. Looking forward to many more interesting
Yeah.
topics. Definitely subscribe, Dorian. And if you are listening to the replay, please subscribe so that you ensure that you don't miss out on any of these discussions or any of these live broadcasts. And this will not be the last time that we will have Dr. Knowles here. I said to him, let's see what your diary allows, and let's see how we can make this work. So thank you again for your time. Thank you, Dorian, for your comments,
Thank you.
and thank you for watching. Please share this live in future. Let me just say goodbye to you. So that means I let you go. Let's just make sure that in future that you subscribe and share the live and tell others that there's an opportunity to have yourself heard, and clearly And feel free to comment like you, Dorian. Thank you so much for joining us and staying and leaving and coming back. I appreciate that, because that is what conversation is about. That is what discussion is about. That we create a platform where we feel, or if we feel we are not being heard, that we at least thrash out some of the issues that some of these political parties or political leaders want to skirt around. Let's also be the voice of those voices on the ground who don't necessarily have access to a live stream or to a YouTube to watch or to participate, who's looking, hustling for work. Let's also create an environment where we can represent them, that we on their behalf can ask the questions. We don't need to be overly critical, but I think we need to be honest, because only through the honest conversations can we grow, can we create and build on tolerance. That it's not a case of, oh, party A or party B, because of the amount of people that they have, members that are part of the government, they get a longer time to speak, or let their voices be heard. So we say no to that. I was going to say pansy, pansy, down with that kind of thinking. Thank you so much for joining me. Let me just change these banners in the meantime. If you want to comment or reach out to me, that's my address, Lynette at amplifymedia.co.za. And feel free to share the live when you see or find me, either on LinkedIn, either on Facebook, or here on YouTube. I try and stream, and depending on the topic, try to switch it up and allow for a bigger audience to participate. Tomorrow is going to be interesting. It's a feel good story tomorrow, especially if you're a pet lover or you have animals. Oh my word, it's just going to tug at your heartstrings. I know it. I know it. And the reason I say that is because I have two dogs, and it's a story of a lost dog. And the dog was found, but the dog had his owners hired a private investigator to find this dog. And in South Africa, we need some good news. Thanks for watching. Take care. Have a stunning day. And I hopefully will see you tomorrow. And yeah, that's where we end it. Take care.